Good morning.
Good morning.
First, just thank you to the TFA team, Kira and Mary and Vanessa, and the folks who thought enough of me to ask me to come and spend a little time with you this morning. As Dwight mentioned, my name is Aaron Walker. I founded Camelback Ventures about 4 years ago. And a lot of it based on my experience as a core member, and all the things that have happened since then. How you guys feeling this morning? You guys feeling energetic? Let me do this. If you're feeling a little tired, you know, it's March. You know, Dwight was talking about the kids seeing summer coming. I can't imagine they're the only ones. So I won't ask anyone to raise their hand. I'll just, you know, if you're feeling that way, on the count of three, just say, One, two, three. And the thing is, you know, when you're feeling tired, when you feel like you wanna stop, then one of the things I try to do is remember why I got started. And you know, I remember as a core member when I would have those feelings, trying to remember why I got started, and that brought me back to my own upbringing and my own childhood. As I mentioned, I grew up in Jersey. You know, when I was 5, my parents moved to the suburban town, and we were the last street in the suburban town, and 100 feet over was North New Jersey. So to put that in a New Orleans context, that would be somewhat the equivalent of if we lived on the last street in Metairie, and then the other side was, you know, New Orleans, maybe the equivalent like Hollywood or something like that. And I remember as a kid realizing that, you know, if we had lived 100 feet over, my story probably would have been really different, and not because there was, you know, anything wrong with the folks who lived in a community like North, just the opportunities that they had, and that they afforded young folks. And you know, for me, in those difficult times, I tried to remember to myself that, you know, I had a responsibility, and that responsibility was that because I happened to grow up right on that dividing line. We sort of talk about zip codes not mattering. I literally lived on the line, on the street where. If I had lived 50 feet over, I would look in a different zip code. But because I didn't, I was fortunate enough to have all these great educational experiences that allowed me to go to UVA and all these other places. And it was those experiences that motivated me to join Teach America. I remember after my freshman year at UVA, I was looking for a job, summer job, and I ended up getting an internship at this summer program in East Harlem, and you know, it was a great job. It was working at the summer program. In the morning, it was enrichment. In the afternoon, it was baseball. For me, I was like, this is the best of both worlds. And I remember only getting paid $100 stipend a week, which was just enough to basically get to New York on the train from New Jersey and have enough money for a slice of pizza. But it was the best summer job I had. And I had a lot of other fancy summer jobs. And it was the best summer job I had. One was because I got the chance to work with these young folks. And it was an opportunity for me to sort of see the power of teaching and see what you could do. And I met a teacher there. It was actually a Teach America teacher it was his summer job. His name was Tim Daly, and he, 4 years later, as I had this undergraduate degree, trying to figure out, well, how am I going to earn money with this? I remember this experience that I had 4 years beforehand in Harlem, and working with Tim, and decided to apply to Teach for America. And that put me on a completely different trajectory. You know, I taught in a high school in West Philadelphia that was actually it was technically a magnet school because kids had to apply, But what I realized is that there are sort of tiers to these things. So there was like the magnet schools that, it was like 2 magnet schools where most of the kids who went to those schools were on grade level. And then there were the magnet schools. If you didn't get into those, then you went to the school, a couple schools like mine where I was at. And those students were a little bit below grade level. And then you had the neighborhood high schools, and those kids were like obscenely and criminally below grade level. And you just sort of saw that the system was completely failing these kids. And so, 2003 was a long time ago, I'm realizing. But we were the first TFA core that was in Philly. And you go in, as Dwight was mentioning, thinking that you're going to be a Jaime Escalante. You're going to come up with all your lessons. It's going to be great. You're going to change the world. And you do a little bit, right? You do some. I do remember in that first year, you're writing your lesson plans the day before, the night before, maybe the weekend before, if you're doing it right. You're making some positive things happen in your classroom. But at the end of the year, one of the things I realized is that it's not about any one individual teacher. You might have 45 minutes with your kids, but when those 45 minutes are over, they're going to a different classroom, and a different classroom, and a different classroom. And we need everyone else in those classrooms to be what they can be, so that we can be what we can be, so that our children can be what they can be. And that in a lot of ways, it is informed by the power of the collective. Like, how can we each be the best that we can be, not only just for our own individual esteem and ego, but for our colleagues and the folks that we work with as well. So that was like the biggest lesson that I took away from my teaching experience, was just how important it was not to look inward, but to also look outward and realize that the sum of the parts sometimes can be greater than any one individual part. And then that sort of put me on this path after the core. It really informed a lot of the things that I did afterward. I went to law school because I had this thought that, well, why isn't education a fundamental right? And so I thought, well, I need to go to law school to figure this question out. And I also need to go to law school because I realized that teaching is the most important job in education, but we make the job so difficult. There were times I would go home and I would say, what we're doing every day for kids is important, but we're asking teachers to perform these heroic tasks to give students sometimes just what we would call a basic education, not anything extraordinary, probably just ordinary. And how a system could not necessarily function like that. And so trying to go to law school to figure out how could we think about the systems that were at play to begin to change some of those things. Learn some things along the way in law school. Ended up going to work at a large law firm, but really wanted to come back to education, and found myself at this place called the Fund for Public Schools, where we got to work with entrepreneurs and begin to sort of see the impact that entrepreneurs can have. And so that sort of put me on this path to start Camelback, because I realized and saw that there were a lot of great entrepreneurs who had these really great ideas out there. But oftentimes, the folks who were creating the new ideas were not from or did not look like the kids who we were serving. And I just had this belief that they were also the solution, not necessarily the thing to be solved. And so we set out to do that. I would say there are three ideas I hope to leave you with today. John F. Kennedy once said, the only reason to give a speech is to change the world. So hopefully I can do a little bit of that today. And so three ideas when we think about this idea of the power of the collective. So one is, you have to believe and understand that you are a group. I sort of think about Dr. King, in one of his more sort of under the radar speeches. He talks about being in jail, and he would oftentimes have discussion with the jailers about segregation, and he was trying to convince them that segregation was wrong. And so one day they get to this point in the conversation where he's asking them about how much money they make, and where they send their kids to school, and in that sweet mellifluous voice that he has, he says, "Y'all need to be marching with us," because he realizes that these folks, the condition that they live in are similar to the conditions that African Americans live in, and that they actually need to understand and believe that they are a group, right? So you don't have a collective without believing that you are a group, first off and foremost. So while folks like his jailers probably didn't take him up on his advice, there were people who did. I think about, last year I had the chance to go to Memphis, and I went to the Civil Rights Museum, and there's an exhibit about the March from Selma to Montgomery, and there's this woman that they featured in the exhibit. Her name is Viola, and she lives in Detroit, and she decides she has 3 young children. She decides to drive down from Detroit to be a part of the march, and to move people and supplies as needed. She got a car, and on her way home, unfortunately, she was murdered by the Klan. But what she understood, even being a white woman in Detroit, was that her destiny was tied in with the folks' destiny that were in Selma. And so, number one, you got to understand that you are a group. Number two, you have to use your privilege. I think that's something that Viola did. You've got to use the privilege that you have. We each have privilege somewhere, somehow, and be able to use that to move the group forward. That's something that Viola did. Thinking about my grandfather, who has passed about 5 years ago, but I remember before he passed, he told us a story. He went to buy his first house, and so this is 1940 New Jersey, and he just married my grandmother, trying to buy this home. But he's a black man, so there's redlining going on, and so he's trying to figure out what is he going to do. And so he has a friend who is this white gentleman, and he tells him his predicament, and they come up with a plan. They say, okay, so what's going to happen is that you will pretend to be the buyer of the home, and I'll pretend to be the handyman. And we will devise this plan so that he can get into this house and see if he wants to buy it. And so they work their plan, and he ends up buying the house and raising 5 children, including my father, in the home. But the lesson there is that he decided to find an ally, someone who has some privilege. And that person who had privilege decided to get in the arena with him and get in the ring with him. And so when you think about the power of the collective in the group, think about how are you going to use your privilege to help that group move their goals forward. And then the last thought is listening. You can understand that you are a group. You can figure out what your privilege is and try to use it to help those who don't have it to move initiatives or issues forward. But then also there's this idea of listening. There was a day a couple months ago. My daughter and wife were at the park over at City Park, and they were just playing. It was like 2:30 in the afternoon, And my wife was like, it's time to go. And so, my wife wants to go in one direction, my daughter wants to go in another direction. And my daughter says, Mommy, we shouldn't go that way because there are bees. And she goes, there are no bees, let's go. And she is insistent. She is insistent that there are bees in the grass and we should not go that way. It is dangerous. And as a parent, you sort of think you know all the answers. So she insists one more time that there are bees in the grass. And my daughter, who was just like her mother, is also insistent. And she says that we are not going that way. And so, like a teacher might do, you sort of crouch down as you're about to, tell the child, we are going this way. But when she crouches down, she sees that she's right, that there are bees in the grass. And she says, you're right. And so they go a different way. And so, when you think about the power of the collective, at some level, it also means listening to the babies. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to folks who may seem younger or different or less abled, but who do have a perspective. They're just sitting at a different level. And they see different things than you see from where you sit. And so trying to find opportunities to go to their level. I won't even say get down to their level. I'll just say go to their level to see what they see. Because you might see something that you've never seen before, which might give you a new way of thinking about things, a new direction to go in. And so I think if we do all of those things, if we understand that we are a group that is tied together and we have a common destiny, if we understand that we have privilege, we should use that privilege to help those who don't have it. But also be humble enough to listen to folks who maybe have a different perspective than us, who see the world in a different way, because they have different experiences. That we will lead ourselves to a path where we can be stronger as a collective, where we can find new innovative paths that will lead us to new solutions. And that's part of sort of what we're trying to do at Camelback, which is that I don't think there's anything inherent about your reproductive organs or the color of your skin. It is for better or for worse the experience that those things have in our society that give you a perspective on the world and on life and on what solutions it could be. And that, as grad students would say, sort of make you proximate to the problem and to the issue at hand. And so, what motivates me about the work that we do at Camelback is, seeing the great folks who we have a chance to work with, and selfishly there is a sense of pride there, but fundamentally it's a strategy. It's an innovation strategy. There's definitely a moral component to the work that we do. We do think it's the right thing to do. But there's a political component to what we do. But that it's also a strategy for change. That when you find folks who are from different backgrounds, who have different perspectives, who are women, who are Black, who are Latino, who are Asian American, who are immigrants, that you put those folks together in a room, and you sort of give space for their genius. One of the things we say at Camelback is that genius is equally distributed, access is not. And so for us, it's not about trying to question the genius of anyone in the room. It's saying that exists in proportion everywhere. And it's just creating a space for that to thrive that we need to do a better job at. So, that is my charge to each of you, is to make space for that, for your genius, make space for others, and do what you can to move folks forward. So I thank you for your time. Appreciate you listening, and I'll be here for a little while, so happy to talk with folks afterwards.
And a colleague in this very interconnected work. We have time for a couple questions for Aaron. Are there any burning questions on your mind? And as you're thinking about those, I'll start it off. Like, I remember when you were getting this idea off the ground, I don't know if I ever said this to you, but I certainly thought it, which was, it's very bold to think about, from what I know about you, we've known each other a long time, you don't have access to wealth personally, right? And yet your theory, is that true? Yeah. Okay. Not to put your business out there, but neither do I. Yeah, but there's something really powerful about a theory of action that said, even though I don't have wealth, I understand that this is a need. I'm going to figure out how to leverage the privilege I do have to create wealth for others. That's a very powerful idea, and I'm sure a lot of people told you no before Yes started. Can you just talk about that for a couple minutes? Like, how did you trust that crazy idea?
So I guess, let me take 2 steps back and say that Camelback is not the first thing that I started. The thing about entrepreneurship is that you try your best to make it seem like a straight line with a positive slope, when really it's sort of like this. And so I guess one thing is that I learned some things from a couple things I started that failed. I think that gave me, I think that did 2 things for me. One is it helped me to realize what I want to do with Camelback, one, but 2, it helped me to think about some choices that I wanted to make. And I realized that there were, even though there were a bunch of no's, that there were privileges that I had. So while I'm a person of color, I am a man, I am male, so I get to maybe be in rooms that women, for worse, I might not necessarily have the initial opportunity to be in. I'm a TFA core member. That is a privilege in ways that maybe you realize, maybe you don't. The schools that I went to, obviously there's privilege abound at a place like Penn and a place like UVA. And so how do you leverage those things? But I guess for me, it's sort of, some of it's just about your orientation. As a kid, I remember I love baseball. Don't have as much time for it as I used to, but I used to write in the brim of my baseball cap before every season, Jackie Robinson, number 42, for obvious reasons. But one of the things that I admired about him was that he used to have this quote. He said that life is not important except for the impact that it has on others. And so I think for me that's just been the ethos, and trying to figure out a way to take the opportunities and take the education that I did have and create a place and a platform to multiply that for other folks, because I knew that there were people of my own family and friends and others who had greatness but did not necessarily have a platform to exercise that greatness. I wish I could say that there was like a magic formula to making it happen, but I do remember when we got started, the first thing I did was, you got to be your first investor. So while I don't come from money, I took a little bit of money I did have, and I think in the haze of having our second child, I convinced my wife to just give it to me. But that was sort of important, right? It sort of said to other people that I'm willing to put everything that I have at risk for this thing. Like the thing is, most times we are more afraid of, like, the reality of what will happen is a lot less than what's in our mind. And so, with that, it was just like, you don't really have that much to lose. Like, you can always get money back. can't get back is time. So if there's something that you want to do, just get together.
We have time for one burning question if it exists.
What's the best business for Black entrepreneurs to get into?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Just stand up, stand up.
What's the best business for a Black entrepreneur to get into?
The one that you're most passionate about? I mean, I don't know. Like, I know my answer sort of clear, but I think the best business for a Black entrepreneur to get into is the best business for anyone to get into. So, find the thing that you are good at, and do it, and be really good at it.